The studio was set, the lights intense, and the air thick with anticipation. Across the glossy debate table sat two figures who couldn't have come from more different worlds. On one side, Karoline Leavitt, sharp in a red blazer, her youthful energy buzzing as she adjusted her mic, clearly ready for a verbal match. On the other, Denzel Washington, calm, collected, posture straight like a coiled spring. The moderator barely finished the first question before Karoline jumped in. "We need to stop pretending that personal stories equal policy. Feelings don't build economies, facts do," she declared, her voice clipped and rehearsed. The audience gave a polite murmur. Denzel didn't blink. He leaned forward slightly, his voice like tempered steel. "No one's asking for feelings to run the country, Karoline. But if your facts come from charts instead of neighborhoods, maybe sit this one out." The crowd stirred. Karoline smiled tightly. "I may not be from Hollywood, Mr. Washington, but I do know how to speak for the average American." Denzel's eyes narrowed. The smile on his face was faint, but the silence between his words hit like thunder. "This isn't a high school debate, Karoline," he said slowly. "And average Americans don't need a cheerleader. They need a listener." Boom. The audience erupted, half in applause, half in shocked laughter. Even the moderator raised his eyebrows. Karoline leaned in, refusing to back down. "And I suppose Hollywood actors are the real moral compass now?" Denzel didn't flinch. "Not Hollywood. Just men who've walked through hell without makeup." The studio cracked. The tension had flipped. Karoline came in fast, expecting scripted back and forth. But this wasn't theater. This was testimony. And Denzel had just taken the floor. Karoline straightened in her chair, her smile faltering just enough for the cameras to catch. She wasn't used to being checked, certainly not like that. Her team, watching from behind the glass, signaled her to pivot. She took a breath and switched tone. "Let's not get dramatic, Mr. Washington. We're here to discuss real issues, like economic freedom, opportunity, and law and order. Not theatrical monologues." Denzel chuckled, low and controlled, like he'd heard this script before. "You talk about freedom like it's a theory. I talk about it like it's something I had to earn with every breath." He turned slightly toward the moderator but kept his gaze drifting back to Karoline, each word sharpening like a blade. "You mention law and order, but from where? A campaign office? I've seen law. I've seen disorder. One wears a badge, and the other wears a necktie." The audience hushed. Karoline's mouth opened, but nothing came out right away. When she finally spoke, it was fast, tight. "Are you suggesting I don't understand struggle because I wasn't born into it?" Denzel's face grew serious, not cruel, just honest. "No. I'm suggesting that when you speak of struggle, you use it to score points. When I speak of it, I'm trying not to reopen a scar." A single gasp came from the front row. Karoline looked to the moderator, hoping for a redirection, but he was frozen, letting it play out. The network wanted sparks, and they were getting fire. Trying to recover ground, she fired back, "I've worked hard for everything I've earned, and I don't need to apologize for not being born in a movie script." Denzel tilted his head. "You're right. You don't need to apologize for your path. But don't belittle those who walked through fire just because they didn't walk your stage." Again, the audience roared. The balance of power on that stage had shifted. Karoline had entered thinking it was a match of wits. But Denzel had turned it into a confrontation of reality. And the crowd was all in. Karoline's smile had disappeared entirely now. Her fingers tapped nervously on the edge of her notes as the red light above the camera blinked. They were live, and the world was watching. She tried to reset, to frame herself as the poised, youthful conservative voice. "Mr. Washington, I may be younger, but I represent a new generation of leaders who believe in discipline, merit, and tradition. That's not something to mock." Denzel folded his hands calmly. He didn't interrupt, but his stillness was loud. When she finished, he nodded once. "Discipline? That's what I was taught in the house where 3 of us shared a room and my mother worked 2 jobs. You want tradition? Try explaining to your son why your friend was pulled over because of his skin. You want merit? Earn it in silence, without the safety net of being groomed for a podium. The silence in the room was surgical. Each sentence cut through the air like a gavel. Karoline leaned forward. You think I've had it easy because I speak with confidence? Because I prepared? Denzel shook his head. No. I think you've confused being coached with being tested. Life hasn't tested you yet, Karoline. You're still answering questions from flashcards. The moderator jumped in, sensing the heat was about to melt through the stage. Let's steer this back to policy. Can we discuss your positions on education and public funding? Denzel didn't break eye contact with Karoline. Education? I support the kind where you don't need to memorize talking points to sound smart. Where experience teaches you more than prep school ever could. Karoline finally stood up from her seat. I'm here because the people elected me. Not because I played a role in a film. Denzel stood too, his voice lowering. You were elected. Respect. But that doesn't make your voice louder, it just means more people are listening when you get it wrong. The crowd gasped. Even through the cameras, the moment burned. 2 generations. 2 Americas. Colliding in real time. And the ratings were skyrocketing. Karoline didn't sit back down. Her team behind the stage signaled frantically, but she held her ground, staring directly at Denzel like she was daring him to flinch. But he didn't. He just stood there, arms relaxed, breathing steady, eyes sharp. You say people are listening when I get it wrong, she snapped, but I'm not the one turning politics into performance art. Denzel smiled faintly. Politics became performance the minute people stopped listening and started clapping at pain like it was applause. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or hold their breath. Karoline crossed her arms. Maybe they're clapping because someone finally says what they feel. Denzel stepped closer to the mic, his voice calm but unmistakably piercing. No, they're clapping because pain is relatable. But when you wrap that pain in catchphrases and soundbites, you disrespect the people actually living it. The moderator's voice cut in, trying to regain control. Okay, let's bring this down a notch. But it was too late. The cameras had already captured what they came for, raw, unscripted confrontation. Karoline leaned forward slightly. So what do you want? For me to be silent? To cry on command like a movie role? Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. I want you to stop speaking for people whose voices you've never heard. I want you to stop acting like struggle is a costume you can try on when it suits your narrative. There it was. That sentence would be clipped, tweeted, subtitled, and reposted 1,000,000 times before the night ended. Karoline's jaw tensed. She opened her mouth but closed it again, realizing any reply might only dig her deeper. And Denzel? He just sat back down, cool, composed, as if the storm was behind him, not brewing around him. But the real storm was just beginning. The moderator shuffled his notes like a nervous poker player, hoping the next topic might ease the rising tension. But the silence between Denzel and Karoline was thick, electric, no shift in subject could dull it now. Let's move on to social programs, the moderator offered, forcing a smile. Ms. Leavitt, you've advocated for reducing government assistance. Could you elaborate? Karoline inhaled sharply, realigning herself for safer ground. Yes. I believe dependency weakens people. We should focus on empowerment, not handouts. Before the moderator could turn, Denzel leaned in. Empowerment without access is just a pretty word. What you call handouts, I call lifelines. Karoline responded quickly, eager to reframe. But don't you think we've created a culture of entitlement? Where people expect everything to be given? Denzel didn't even blink. I think we've created a culture where people like you believe poverty is a choice. The audience tensed. Tell me, Karoline, he said, voice even, have you ever watched a single mother skip dinner so her kid could eat? Or told a man who's worked 3 jobs he's just not trying hard enough? Karoline's mouth parted, but she hesitated. I speak to Americans every day, she answered. They want dignity, not dependence. Denzel nodded. Then stop confusing dignity with denial. Wanting help isn't weakness. Pretending people don't need it, that is. A few claps echoed from the crowd. Karoline tried again. So what? We just expand the system forever? Spend until we drown? No, Denzel said, firmly. We invest in people until they can swim. That line landed heavy. Even the moderator went quiet. Karoline sat down slowly, the heat of the exchange still flushing her face. Denzel didn't gloat. He simply looked ahead, like he wasn't here to win, just to be heard. But he had already won something bigger than the debate, the room. Karoline sat in silence for a moment, glancing at the monitor showing the live stream. Social media was already on fire. Hashtags were exploding, clips of Denzel's last lines going viral before the segment even ended. She shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of the weight of every word. You've got great lines, she said finally, her voice sharper than before. But speeches don't solve problems. Denzel raised an eyebrow. No. But silence guarantees they never get solved. The moderator tried to interject, again. Perhaps we can move to closing thoughts. But Karoline wasn't finished. You keep lecturing me like I've never seen hardship, she snapped. But I've seen addiction. I've seen broken families. I've worked with people who've lost everything. Denzel nodded slowly. Then you should know better than to treat those stories like statistics. The audience stirred. This isn't about pity, he continued. It's about power. Who has it, who's afraid to share it, and who pretends it doesn't exist unless it fits a headline? Karoline leaned in, defiant. You think I'm pretending? I think you're performing, Denzel said. For donors. For party lines. For a version of America that looks good on a poster but doesn't match what's happening 2 blocks from here. That stung. She tried to push back, but the words wouldn't land. Denzel's presence wasn't theatrical, it was lived in, unshakable. You came here for points, he added, but some of us came to speak for people who never get a mic. The moderator finally called it. We're out of time. Final words, 30 seconds each. Karoline adjusted her notes, but her hand trembled slightly. Denzel, meanwhile, folded his paper and tucked it away. No need to read from it. He'd already said everything they didn't want to hear, but needed to. The countdown clock blinked on screen, 30. Karoline tried to find her rhythm, her voice steadier than her pulse. I came here tonight to offer solutions. I believe in hard work, responsibility, and a country where anyone can rise if they try hard enough. That's the America I fight for. It was polished, safe, the kind of closer built for applause. She smiled, waiting for it. But only a few scattered claps came. Then the moderator turned to Denzel. Mr. Washington. 30 seconds. Denzel didn't rush. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Karoline, not to attack, but to make sure she listened. I didn't come here to win a round. I came here to break a cycle. The room went still. A cycle where pain is dismissed as politics. Where stories are turned into sound bites. Where someone like you can quote the Constitution and still miss the humanity between the lines. He looked out into the audience now. If we want to fix this country, we start by listening, especially to the people we've been taught to ignore. The clock hit 0, but no one interrupted. And Karoline, he said gently, someday, when life stops giving you talking points and starts giving you wounds, I hope someone's there to listen to you too. The moderator swallowed hard. Silence. No applause. No cheers. Just wait. Karoline didn't respond. Couldn't. Because in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the cameras cut to commercial, but the tension didn't. Karoline sat frozen, lips pressed together, her hands clenched under the desk. Her team rushed toward the stage, whispering furious notes and suggestions into her earpiece. She waved them off. Denzel stood, calmly removing his mic, but Karoline turned toward him, eyes sharp, voice low but edged with fire. "You didn't come here to debate. You came here to humiliate." Denzel paused, his expression unreadable. Then, without raising his voice. "No, Karoline. I came here to stop the bleeding. You just didn't expect the wound was yours." Karoline bristled, voice rising. "You think you're some kind of moral savior?" "I think I'm a mirror," he said. "And tonight, maybe you didn't like the reflection." The moderator approached, hesitant. "We're back in 60 seconds, folks." Denzel turned to him, nodded, then looked back at Karoline. "This isn't personal," he added. "But it should be. Because the moment we treat people's lives like policy memos, we've already lost." Karoline didn't answer. Not because she had nothing to say, but because every response felt hollow now. Rehearsed. Thin. The cameras blinked back on. The broadcast resumed with a wide shot of both figures, one standing still like a storm had passed through him. The other, seated, silent, staring straight ahead. And across millions of screens, viewers weren't just watching a debate anymore. They were watching a shift. Something had cracked. And everyone could feel it. The final segment resumed, and though both figures were visible, all eyes were on Denzel. The moderator cleared his throat, trying to inject normalcy back into a night that had veered far from it. "We've got time for one final audience question." A woman stood up from the third row, her voice trembling slightly. "This question is for both of you. What does leadership mean in today's America?" Karoline reached for the mic first, desperate to regain ground. "Leadership means being unapologetic. It means standing firm in your beliefs, even when you're criticized. I won't let guilt or emotion rewrite the values that made this country great." She nodded, confident she had landed something strong. Then Denzel took the mic. But this time, he didn't speak immediately. He let silence hang. "Leadership," he finally said, "means carrying weight that isn't yours. And refusing to drop it, even when the world pretends it doesn't exist." He looked out over the audience. "It means walking into rooms where your truth makes others uncomfortable, and still telling it. It means knowing the system wasn't built for everyone, and speaking like it was, until that lie becomes a truth." Karoline fidgeted slightly. "Leadership isn't volume. It isn't confidence. It's compassion. It's listening before speaking. And sometimes, it's being willing to say, 'I was wrong.'" The woman in the audience sat down slowly, visibly moved. Even the moderator's eyes glistened for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Washington," he said quietly. Karoline had no rebuttal this time. The stage was no longer hers. The fight she came prepared for had changed shape. She wasn't battling for applause anymore, she was battling to be heard in a conversation she thought she could control. And she had lost that ground without ever seeing it shift. The broadcast drew to a close, the music fading in soft and ceremonial. But the air in the studio was anything but calm. Karoline sat stiffly, her jaw tight, her hands locked together. Her campaign aides hovered just beyond the curtain, whispering damage control strategies, trying to get ahead of the viral wave that had already begun swallowing headlines. Denzel, still seated beside her, hadn't said another word since his final remarks. As the credits rolled and the cameras dimmed, Karoline turned to him one last time, not as a political opponent, but as a person who had just been cracked open. "You planned this, didn't you?" she asked, voice low. "You came here to make an example of me." Denzel looked at her, no arrogance, no heat. Just clarity. "No. I came here to remind people that real talk still matters. If that felt personal, maybe it was never just about me." She looked down. "You made me look like a child." "I didn't," Denzel replied. "But I did ask questions your advisors never taught you to answer." Silence again. Then, as he stood, he extended his hand. Not to shake, but to offer a final word. Next time, Karoline, come to speak. Not to win. And with that, he walked off the stage. Behind him, the screens were already lighting up with headlines. Denzel Washington redefines political debate on live TV. Karoline Leavitt outclassed in primetime showdown. Truth versus talking points, and truth won. Somewhere far away, a teenager rewatched the debate twice, inspired. A journalist changed the lead on tomorrow's column. And Karoline? She sat quietly, surrounded by silence she couldn't spin. Because sometimes, the most powerful performance isn't an act at all. In an age where every word is rehearsed and every moment staged, what happens when someone finally speaks without a script? Tonight wasn't a debate. It was a wake-up call. A clash between performance and truth, youth and wisdom. And as the dust settles, only one question remains: will America keep applauding noise, or start listening to silence?